All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Saito Takauji. You can just call me Uji. This class is Managing, Leading, and Inspiring, a primer for officers, recruitment, and retention. I do want to say before we get going that this is the first time that I've done this class, so I am absolutely open to feedback on how it went, what I could do to tool it in more specifically to make sure that it is kind of hitting the needs that we need it to for what we're doing. And also thank you for being here and taking time out of your day to come hear me ramble about management and leadership for a little bit. So our table of contents, because I always like to signpost things. I'm going to start off with the introduction, my background, then we're going to do broad definitions of leadership, management, and inspiration. We're going to talk about the downsides of each of them. We're going to talk about the SEA context, and we're going to talk about putting it into action. My plan is, since after about 40 minutes, I start to absolutely despise the sound of my own voice, that after that, there will be time for questions and answers. I am happy to take questions as they come up as well, as long as we're not running too far behind. So to start off with an introduction, one of the problems with discussing leadership in the SEA is that there is no standard definition of the terms that we use. Officers and volunteers with different backgrounds and understandings begin to work without ever defining those terms. This can lead to differing expectations and outcomes, which contribute to difficulties in groups and burnout among participants. The goal of this presentation is to provide a working definition of each of these concepts and discuss how it can be used to ease the difficulties and inspire retention and better volunteer management in an SEA context. By the end, you should be able to understand the problems with the image to the right and more accurately describe management and leadership. And I specifically included this image to the right because I think it's a really common one that you see among people that do want to be good in management and leadership positions. I chose this specific image, in fact, because it is on the wall of the office of my boss's boss. Right. And this person, who is a very experienced attorney who has stepped up recently into a very senior role in our part of the state, wants to be not just a boss, but a leader, not just a manager, but a leader. And that's a very noble goal. And I think the people that print these out, if they're not just doing it for looks or they're not just doing it without thinking about it, do genuinely want to be good leaders. But it's also important that we understand that there is a place for management, that management is not a dirty word, that leadership is not inherently superior to management, and that sometimes there is a place where we do need someone to just tell us how to do it. So by the end of this, hopefully we will have a good working framework and be able to figure out exactly when we do just need someone to tell us and when we need someone pulling with us. Some background about myself. As I said, my name is Saito Takauji, also known as Matthew Parker. In the SCA, I am the current Baron of the Barony of Magmore. Previously, I have been Gold Falcon Principal Herald of Callantyre, a Deputy Kingdom Seneschal, a Baronial and Canton Seneschal multiple times, as well as being a member of the Additional Peerage Exploratory Committee and the chair of the Grand Council, I think for 2 years. In other organizations, I am a peer, as well as the Lord Chancellor, which is the Pro Bono Corporate Council, and a former leadership instructor for the Royal Manticore Navy, Inc., which is TRMN. I'm a two-time Worshipful Master and the incoming chair of the Education Committee in the Grand Lodge that I live in Freemasonry. And professionally, I am a member of the Nebraska State Bar Association House of Delegates and on several committees, as well as a former County Judicial Nomination Commissioner. All of which I include not to stroke my own ego, but specifically to say, if you are taking this class, you deserve to understand that I am not just some schmo who's never done any of the things that I'm talking about. I do have experience with them and hopefully will not be wasting your time. I like to include that because I think that we've all gone to classes. Whoops. I was going to admit someone and somebody else was much quicker. We've all gone to classes and by the end kind of gone, well, why did this person teach this class specifically? So here's why. I also wanted to include this because part of the genesis for this class actually does come through my participation in TRMN, that first one there. where when you join, the Royal Manticore Navy is the official Honor Harrington fan association for the Honor Harrington science fiction novels by David Weber. When you join TRMN, you join one of the good guy factions present in the books, and you are given both a personal civil rank and a military/governmental rank. If you want to advance in your military/governmental rank, you have to take examinations. And those examinations begin as kind of general book trivia / basic organizational information for TRMN. But as you are taking those tests, which will normally correspond with increased oversight and leadership and management, you also begin to be introduced to the theories of organizational management and the principles of leadership and management and organizational theory, so that by the time you have the rank associated with that test, because you can test in advance of receiving the rank, by the time you actually have the rank associated with those tests, you are stepping into those positions with a common framework and context for what TRMN means when it talks about leading and managing and what its expectations are. So that theoretically everybody in higher positions has gone through the same training and knows the same vocabulary. And I won't claim that TRMN is uniquely brilliant in this. It is by no means a replacement for going through an MBA or getting a degree in organizational leadership, but it does provide that common context and help define terms that many of us use or are aware of without really thinking about what we mean. And it can be very useful both in the organization and in other contexts. I got my first attorney position in part because I was able to go into a discussion of management and micromanagement using the vocabulary that TRMN, of all things, had prepared me to discuss. And this class idea was born when it came to my attention after years and years in the SCA. It finally struck me that we don't really have anything similar in the SCA. So we have people coming into those positions and expecting different things of themselves and others without ever having established a common framework. So some very broad definitions. And these are just glossy slides to put some ideas into your mind before we get into a little bit more definition, and then before we get into really the meat of the definitions here. So leadership. Leadership is showing the better way regardless of position. And that's the part that I want to stick in your mind right from the beginning, is leadership is regardless of position. Management is applied leadership, much maligned. And inspiration is lighting the fire no matter the position. So we have right from the beginning these three terms, which are obviously very intertwined. If I'm calling management applied leadership, they can't be wholly independent. And if I'm saying that inspiration can be a part of either one of them, obviously the Venn diagram is not three completely separate circles. They are related. And as we'll talk about, you can accomplish leadership objectives with management skills. You can accomplish management objectives with leadership skills, and you can use inspiration skills to bolster either of them. But they are different, and those differences are important. This is a quote from Stephen Covey, oh God, I'm blanking on the book. Highly effective, the skills of highly effective leaders, or whatever it is. Of course, I would forget this now, not when I've practiced this a dozen times. Effective leadership is putting first things first. Effective management is discipline, carrying it out. Again, this is not a real deep definition, but it is something that I want you to keep in mind. Because again, we talk very negatively about management and very positively about leadership, but Stephen Covey would remind you that both are required, both are needed. So to go to some very broad definitions, leadership is a position-independent skill or trait in which we will talk about 10 behaviors and 4 situational styles. A leader is the person people look toward to see how the job should get done, even if they have no authority to tell you that. Management is authority dependent. And we'll talk about 5 basic functions and 5 management skills. And management is the person telling you what jobs need to get done. Inspiration, we'll talk about 7 secrets. It is position independent and an ephemeral quality which may not always be present from the same person. An inspirer is someone who makes you want to do the job. And note that none of these are negative. They exist within certain contexts, and each can have positive and negative aspects. So to clench that broad definition, a leader is a manager. We'll start there. A manager is the person who assigns you a task and who will be judged on the execution and performance of the task. They are the one who deals out to you what must be done for your organization, for your office, for your project. A leader is someone who steps up when they have been told what to do, or when there is a gap in that explanation or a gap in that management, and leads, essentially. And it's terribly reductive to say that a leader leads, but that's kind of we all know it when we see it. It's the person who, once your manager has said, all right, team, I need you to accomplish this by the end of the week, go, everyone in the room turns their head to a leader, whether that's the manager or not, and looks to them to see, all right, here's how we're breaking that down. Here's how we are accomplishing it. So to go back to what Stephen Covey said, it can go both ways in that management is applied leadership, and that leadership is taking management and putting it into practice where you are needing to go beyond a simple assignment of tasks. And then inspiration is that spark, that fire, that person whom or goal or ideal that makes you want to do the job. A manager tells you what to do. A leader shows you how to do it. Inspiration makes it important that you accomplish it. And again, none of these are negative. The best teams, the best offices, the best groups have management, leadership, and inspiration. So ideally, you want to see all 3. Unfortunately, a lot of times, in both the corporate environment and in the SCA, we're lucky if we get 1. Corporate environment because working for a living is what it is, and the SCA because we are dependent on the volunteers that we have. So leadership. Again, leadership is position independent and shows skills and qualities that do not rely on having an authority either to induce good behavior or correct negative behavior. And in this, House and Potsikoff have shown 10 behaviors of good modern leaders, and Hersey and Blanchard have shown 4 situational styles. And I think we can talk a little bit about each of these, but one of the things that I like about these is that they tend to be a little bit self-explanatory. So the behaviors: vision, passion and self-sacrifice, confidence, determination, and persistence, image building, role modeling, external representation, expectations of and confidence in followers, selective motive arousal, frame alignment, and inspirational communication. Some of those are pretty obvious, right? By vision, we mean that someone has the vision of how to accomplish the project or the goal, right? That a leader is someone who can encompass both the short-term tasks and the long-term tasks, and knows how to bridge the gap between those short-term goals and long-term goals. Passion and self-sacrifice. Leaders tend to be those people who come in with a lot of enthusiasm for it. In fact, one of the ways that you can develop a leader is by taking something that they are enthusiastic about and allowing them to take the lead in those areas. They can then build that into an ability to develop enthusiasm even for things that they don't necessarily start off with enthusiasm about. Confidence, determination, and persistence. Again, pretty self-explanatory. Image building is a behavior where you take your vision and you create a understandable vision of it for the rest of the team or the people that you're working with, right? It is taking your vision and moving it to the next step, where rather than it just being internal to you or maybe not fully sketched out, you are creating a blueprint that can be followed. Role modeling is that quality of a leader where they are never asking of someone else something they wouldn't do themselves. The people that you are leading see you doing those same kinds of tasks, right? This is the leaders eat last, or that very first image where we showed someone pulling alongside the other workers, right? That's role modeling. External representation is the ability to present the project and advocate for the project to external parties, whether those are external stakeholders or simply interested people who might be able to contribute, or recruitment. Expectation of and confidence in followers is what we otherwise call delegation, that you are, as a leader, and obviously this one applies to managers as well, you are willing to set tasks for the people that you are leading, and you trust them to accomplish them. So it's not laissez-faire, but neither is it micromanaging, which we will also talk about. Selective motive arousal and frame alignment are two areas in which inspiration overlaps with leadership. Selective motive arousal is finding the motivation for each of the people that you are leading that leads them to want to participate fully in the project or give as much as they can, right? And it's selective motive arousal because if you've got a team of 5 people who are there to, say, overhaul a website or create a new app for reporting, each of them may be there for different reasons, whether because they're the only person who knows how to code in the language that they're going to use, and so they get dragged into all of these things, or because they're really excited about the applications for it, or because they are looking to step into more roles of that kind. Selective motive arousal is the ability to go and meet your people on an individual level and inspire them and lead them based on where they're at and what they're looking for. Frame alignment is the same kind of thing, but on a broader scope, making sure that everybody in your team or everybody working on the project has aligned their frames of references, their goals, and what they understand the outcomes to be, to make sure that everyone is rowing in the same direction. And inspirational communication is, I think everybody can recognize that. If you've ever seen a sports movie, the coach goes into the locker room at halftime and inspires the team to go back out onto the field and give it their all. The 4 situational styles of leadership by, again, Drs. Paul Hersey and Ken Blanchard are divided into 4 levels. They represent different levels of leadership engagement rather than qualities or maturity. They have a different scale for maturity of leadership. These are just the 4 situational styles, each of which has positives and negatives, and each of which is best in a different circumstance. And those go from S1 to S4: telling or directing, selling or coaching, participating or supporting, and delegating. And S1 is the most directly controlling, and S4 is the most laissez-faire. One of the important things about leadership is recognizing in which circumstances those are required. When you are coming in as an SCA officer, it is very important to look at the office that you're taking, the group that you're leading, whatever that context is, and think about which of these it needs. Because there are circumstances where if you're building something from the ground up, or if something has fallen to the wayside and needs to be restarted, that you might need to be telling, directing. You might need to be on a day-to-day basis directing individuals to do certain things in order to accomplish a goal. If you are lucky enough to be stepping into a circumstance where your leadership is to maintain good works, you might be more in the participating, supporting, or even delegating roles where things are running well and you don't need to be as directly involved. When I stepped up as Gold Falcon Principal Herald, I was lucky enough that the college was, for the most part, functioning very well. There were some big ticket things that we needed to do. We needed to reorganize some of the offices for some of the society best practices. But for the most part, we had a staff that knew what they were doing, that had either done it previously or had been working towards their positions for a while, and we were able to trust them to just keep going at the excellent level that they had been. So we were in a much more participating, supporting, or delegating level. Again, there is not negative to telling, directing, or selling coaching, which is where you have selling coaching is more where you have people who are in the offices and know what they need to do, but either maybe due to burnout or maybe due to some recent changes that they are concerned about, you need to sell them on doing it. There's not a negative to being in an S1 situation versus an S3 or 4. It is, as a leader, recognizing what is required in those circumstances. Excuse me. And again, these are all things that you can be doing without having any authority to appoint or remove people or do anything other than, pump them up. You can show your vision and your passion and build an image and role model without having the authority to appoint people. You can direct and you can delegate without having the authority to assign those tasks if you are a leader who people are listening to. So all of these are good skills that make you a leader and can be applied in any circumstance. Management. And I'm going to start from the bottom up front, because I think that that's one of the really important things as we move toward talking about this in the SEA context. Management comes from authority because it must come with metrics and performance expectations. You have to have someone to manage and authority to manage them. If you are not giving your manager authority, you are setting them up to fail. And we will talk about that because I think that is one of the major things that comes up in SCA officer positions, and thus as a problem of recruitment and retention, is that we put people in managerial or quasi-managerial roles without giving them the authority to achieve those goals, either positive or negative. And that sets up a problem. So these are kind of more abstract ideas, but they're also really good things to think about as in the SCA, you think about what kind of officer are you? What are you best at? And what are the functions and skills that you need someone to fill when you are hiring or filling an office? And I do think that one of the things, at the risk of being too corporate or making the SCA too corporate, one of the things that we need to recontextualize to think about is not filling an office, but hiring an officer. So the 5 basic functions of management are planning, organizing, coordinating, commanding, and controlling. Each of those, again, is very related, and they kind of flow. If you think about projects that you've managed or projects that you've been managed on, those all flow through the whole project, right? It is I won't say impossible to start a project without planning for it, but it certainly helps if you've taken the time to plan. Once you have a plan, you need to organize your people, your resources, and put them in positions where they can begin to work. Then, as a manager, you are coordinating those resources that you've planned and organized. Commanding and controlling are, again, very related terms. Commanding is more especially for people, and controlling for resources, at least the way I describe it. Where in management, you need to be able to, as much as you can, have authority over the people and the resources that you need in order to accomplish your tasks. If any one of these 5 basic functions is removed from you, it gets exponentially harder to manage your people and your projects. And I think that we've all been there, right? Or we've all seen that, especially in a corporate environment where frequently managers will not have perhaps the commanding function or the controlling function. My boss, because we work for the state government, can hire within certain limitations because our salaries are set by statute. The number of people that we can hire is set by regulation. So he has some command, but he can't fire people as easily if they are not performing, because we are the government and we do have civil service protections. I'm in favor of those, but it is a limitation on him as a manager. He has to go up to higher levels if there is an issue where somebody needs to be fired and they are outside of their initial worker probation. And he has very little controlling management ability because, again, he can't give us bonuses. We don't get bonuses at all. We work for the state. He can't allocate resources. We have tried to hire a paralegal for the entire almost 2 years I've been there. We've gone through, I think, 6 or 7 people we've made offers to, but then they immediately get a better offer from the private sector, and we can't match it because we're the state. And again, those things are set by statute and regulation. So he has very little controlling ability, and as a result, has difficulty in managing the team in certain ways because of it. Moving from those basic functions, there are 5 matching conceptual management skills that are used to accomplish those functions. And those are political, conceptual, interpersonal, diagnostic, and technical. Diagnostic, I think, is the only one that might be a little bit less readily understood because the others are, again, since they're such high level, it's kind of easy to go, oh, I know what that means. Diagnostic here means like diagnostic criteria in medicine. You are diagnosing problems so that you know how to fix them. And then inspiration. And again, this shows how they are related to both leadership and management, because inspiration, what I'm sending you to here, are the 7 secrets of inspiring leaders from Forbes, which, again, inspiring leaders. But they can equally be said to apply to inspiring managers. And those 7 secrets are igniting enthusiasm, navigating a course of action, selling the benefit, painting a picture, inviting participation, reinforcing optimism, and encouraging potential. Someone can be a good manager or a good leader without being inspirational. And I think many of us have had good, but not inspirational leaders or managers. My current manager, my current boss, I have outright described as the best boss that I've ever had. He's not getting up and giving inspirational speeches. He is a good, solid man who we know would not ask us to do anything that he is not already doing a lot of himself. But it's not necessarily, inspiration is not necessarily his strong suit. He is a pretty buttoned down, kind of quiet guy. Great manager, great leader, but not lighting that fire underneath us because we don't need to. We're in a professional environment, and we all appreciate someone who's just given us what we need to get the job done as best as it can, given the limitations. But I think we've all also seen those circumstances where something that would be much more difficult has been made a lot better by someone who is exercising these tricks. Some of them, like navigating a course of action, that is something that you can cultivate pretty easily by simply working to overcome decision paralysis. A lot of times you can get to a position on your teams or your offices where there are multiple potential outcomes that are valid. And sometimes someone just needs to make a decision. And once that logjam is cleared, everybody can move on. The one that I point to with this was when we started the SCA group in Thailand, the canton of Golden Plains, still going strong, very proud of it. We started from the perspective that we would be a canton of the Palatine Barony of the Far West, because the Palatine Barony of the Far West covered Asia, and we were in Thailand. So Thailand's Asia, why not? Corporate, then under Renee Signorati, when we first were moving our memberships and talking to corporate about what we wanted to do, initially said, well, are you sure you don't want to be part of LOCAC? Because their equidistant away, and that's a kingdom as opposed to a barony. We were stuck for a week. We had existential conversations because that was a good point. We could, if we wanted to, be a shire of Lochak. We would have a kingdom closer, even though we wouldn't have a baronial structure. There were good points both ways. And finally, as the incipient seneschal, I just kind of had to say, all right, we've all thought about it. I think we should go with the Far West. It's traditional. It gives us the opportunity to participate in the Palatine barony system, as opposed to just being a shire, which means that we could have coroneted leadership in Thailand for periods of time if one of our people wins coronet turning. And it also is more traditional. The logjam was cleared. We all acknowledged that there was an equally valid alternate universe where we were part of Lochak, and very happy and proud to be so. But we went with the Far West and the West. And to this day, that's what the canton is. And we just needed to navigate that course of action, sell the benefit, and get through it. Encouraging potential is one that I especially want to talk about here, because this is one area in which the SCA is both great and terrible. And this gets into we need to be careful about rushing new people into offices, which is another class, I believe, here at the symposium. Encouraging potential does not necessarily just mean putting them in an office. Encouraging potential means nurturing that spark of inspiration to the point where they can do at the level they want to do what they are inspired to do. And sometimes that is an office, and sometimes it'll be an office very quickly. But we do need to be careful about encouraging potential not becoming, oh, thank God, we just need anyone in this office. You have potential, do it, because then we will inspire them to burn out. So let's talk about some of the negatives of both of leadership management and inspiration, because all of them are very positive things that can also have negative sides. Leadership, because it is independent of position, leadership can be used contrary to goals or best practices. And individual-based leadership, or cult of personality, which falls apart in the absence of the leader, or which is directed only toward that leader's benefit. Again, I think that most people in the SCA have seen circumstances where someone is charismatic or skilled or knowledgeable, but they have a tendency to use those leadership opportunities they're given primarily for their own advancement rather than the good of the group or the project. And I think heaven knows most people who have worked for even a couple of years in any kind of corporate environment will have certainly seen that kind of thing. The downside of management, and honestly, the reason why I think management gets such a dirty name is because of micromanagement or complete laissez-faire, hands-off management, right? Management is kind of more harder to tune, right? The butter zone for management is a lot smaller. Too direct and you get into micromanagement. Too indirect and you aren't providing the guidance that you need to as a manager. It takes kind of a confidence in your skills and an experience, having done it, to know when you are trending too far in either direction. Obviously, the downsides of micromanagement are that it stifles innovation and it causes people to not want to try to innovate because you'll just tell them how to do it regardless. And laissez-faire to indirect causes people to feel directionless and not feel like they can take any initiative because they don't know if they are initiating in the correct direction. Inspiration, similar to leadership, it can be used against the goals of the organization, and this can be either purposeful or not purposeful, right? One of the problems that I think we see a lot in SCA projects is inspiration causing scope creep, right? We start off with a very simple, achievable project. It hits all of those smart goals we talk about in corporation and government, right? Specific, measurable, achievable. I can never remember what the R and T are, but it fits all of the good goals. And then there's just more ideas. What if this app that we're using, that we're developing for officer reports, could also be used for marshal reports, and could also be used for authorizations, and could also be used for court reports? And now you are creating a giant monstrosity that does too many things okay and nothing great. Note, as Callantyr has recently expanded the use of the Callan system, this is not a specific complaint about Callantyr, something that I have seen too many times in other places. But I don't want anyone on the Callantyr Webminister team to think I'm calling them out, because I'm not. Inspiration is also difficult because it can be fickle, right? If you are on a team that's been really inspired for a really long time, when that inspiration goes, it can be hard to keep going, because that fire isn't lit anymore, but the tasks still need to be accomplished. So it's important that you build into yourself and into your teams an ability to keep going even when it's no longer super exciting and passionate. When you've moved beyond the we're going to fix the world stage to we're going to keep this thing running stage. The SCA contexts. SCA volunteer positions, whether official or unofficial, can be classified as management, leadership, or inspirational positions. One reason why members fail in volunteer positions is a mismatch of expectations, expecting management performance without management authority, for example. This leads to burnout and sometimes leaving the SCA. This is where the rubber meets the road. Why are we talking about this? Because now that we have kind of an understanding, or at least a very loose understanding, of the difference between management, leadership, and inspiration, we can talk about what those mean in the SCA. At most people serving in offices in the SCA, most people volunteering in the SCA are doing so at a local level, right? I don't have a citation for that, but it passes the smell test. It makes common sense. There's only one slate of top-level kingdom officers. Beneath them, they have deputies. But, for example, in Callantyr, we have 6 baronies, which means at any given time, there are 6 baronial seneschals, 6 baronial exchequers, 6 baronial heralds. And I think we have an equal number of shires and cantons compared to the 1 kingdom seneschal, the 1 kingdom exchequer, the 1 kingdom herald. At the lowest level, we have people who are stepping into positions that only have leadership authority, but will generally be measured on management indicators. And that can be a difficult thing if that is not taken into account, right? Because, for example, at our baronial level, we have 4 meetings a month, because most months have 4 weeks. We expect our each of those to have a different theme. Right, one is always our business meeting, one is always ANS. Then we normally have a project night. We've added a discussion night, and different officers are responsible for different parts of that. At the local level, really, our seneschal is the only one besides kind of the baronage that have management authority. Right, we expect our arts and sciences officer to once a month make sure that there is a class or ANS activity. But that ANS officer does not actually have the ability to compel people to do it, right? This is volunteer management. The baronial ANS officer cannot Shanghai people into doing a class. So when we are judging the performance of our baronial ANS officer, we need to take into account that sometimes there is going to be a scramble for classes, not because they have fallen down on the job, but because it's the holidays, nobody wants to teach, everybody's taught recently. And so we need to not be expecting that person to be able to accomplish management tasks without having any management authority. Now, that person does need to be trying to do it. There needs to be evidence that they are working at it. They need to be finding a way to do something in accomplishment of their office. They need to be communicating those difficulties to our selves as Baron and Baroness and to our Seneschal. So there are things that we expect them to be doing, even if there are difficulties because they don't have management authority. But in a circumstance where the baronage and the seneschal are not aware of those difficulties, are not considering the management versus leadership gulf, then it can be very burning out for a local officer to be expected to deliver management results without having any management authority. This leads to putting it into action. What are the ways in which we can create reasonable expectations, that we can create offices that are set up to succeed even in the difficulties of a volunteer management context, and in which we can try to reduce the what we might call bureaucratic or administrative contributors to burnout. And I have these divided into 3 different things: clear understandings, clear expectations, and clear communications. Clear understandings, one of the first ones is create job descriptions for SEA positions. Include specific key performance indicators or goal tasks, which will be reviewed. I see this much more at the corporate level, frequently at the kingdom level, and often almost non-existent at the local level. You would rarely apply for a job in your career or profession where you were going in and didn't have an understanding of what you were expected to deliver on. Why should we expect our officers to do the same? Now, some of this is if you are in a smaller group, like Magmore is a smaller group with a population that largely has been around for a long time. So for some of those people, they know what a seneschal needs to do. They know what a exchequer needs to do because they have done it before. Oh no, 5-minute warning. So let me burn through this. So that can be helpful for newer people, or if you want to reorganize. Explain clearly management authority if it exists, or clearly indicate it doesn't, and then that ties into clear expectations. Resist the push to measure positions based on other indicators than what was discussed or advertised without expanding or refocusing the position. Do not allow scope creep to enter your offices. And if an officer is going above and beyond, do not expect that of the next officer to hold that position unless you have clearly made that part of their responsibilities. Resist the temptation to assign blame for factors outside the authority or control of the officer, but do require them to still be attempting to deal with them if it's within the scope of their office to do so. Clear communication. Institute annual reviews with your officers/direct reports. Management is more than a monthly business meeting. Check in with your people and make sure how they're doing outside of however often your office or group gets together. And create a culture where people can discuss their burnout or dissatisfaction, and they feel like it is a safe environment for them to do so. These will allow you to delineate between management and leadership functions, allow you to ensure that those roles are being filled in the ways in which they need to be, and hopefully create circumstances in which your officers and volunteers are continuing to feel like they are supported, working within their contexts, and working with a clear understanding of what they are required to do. One final quotation before we get into some quick questions. I describe management as arts, crafts, and science. It is a practice that draws on arts, craft, and science, and there is a lot of craft, meaning experience. There's a certain amount of craft, meaning insight, creativity, and vision, and there is the use of science, technique, or analysis. There is my contact information, including my personal email and the best named website on the internet. If you have any questions or want to see any of the other things that I've done, I will now be happy to open it up for questions.